All right, so let's zoom back in here and continue to ink. So, just keep in mind, you do want to always kind of pan back. I like to ink closer just so I can watch the line clarity, but you do got to be very aware of your distance. Another good way to do this is actually use maybe a navigation window. So let me show you that real quick. You can go window. I don't use this as much as I should. New. And you can actually set this window off to the side if you want from the other window. And let's see if I got to be able to see the side of this window. So we got to move that over, move this one over, kind of play around with them here just till you get to the side of it. And you can really drag it anywhere though. You could probably sandwich it over to the top as well, but this is generally how I'll do it. So I'll bring it over and I want to slide this middle portion over. And so I want to keep one small, one large. So something like this. So now what happens is I can get this just to the reduction size that I'm thinking about. And then over here I can work at full scale. So it's kind of neat. Some people might find this to be distracting. So I just want to at least show you how to do it. You can also even flip this window independently, which I think is pretty neat and pretty exclusive to this program. So what you do is go to, let's see, window, navigation. Where is that? Is it down here somewhere? Navigator. And through the navigator, which is now over here, it's another window. Trying not to confuse you here, but what happens is it'll flip just the one window. So these little buttons right here, you can flip them up and down, which I don't use that, but horizontally, side to side, and notice that it didn't flip the other window. So, and you can place this one in a smaller subcategorized window as well. So wherever you need that, but I don't want to have too many windows here. I just want to show you there's lots of options. I'll leave it back on the layer property. So now what happens is, as I'm working over here, you'll see it's going to add that line. Sometimes it takes a second, but it adds that line over to the other side. So generally I'll do this for not really inking so much, more drawing as far as the flipped window that you see there. Also, you remember you can scale down your bracket, and if you got a longer line that you want to drop in first with a shift click. So I'm holding shift, so I'm pressing on the screen where I want to start. I hold shift, I can drag that line wherever I want and let go. And as I mentioned in the previous lesson, I actually like to draw out these lines more, but it can be a nice way to kind of check perspective and start with an initial line. So I can go all the way to here. I can pay attention to where that line ends up. And then I can hover my cursor over top, hit Command Z, click, and then finish that line. So you can do it any number of ways back and forth, and then you can check that and make sure that it did line up. See, it did. So there's lots of neat little ways you can use shift click to help you perspectively. And even though I'm going to drop in that what I consider a boring line, I can go back over top and I can kind of resculpt it a little bit with a bigger brush. So I can make it look a bit more like a hand-drawn line, but I know that I've kind of checked my perspective first. Because there's lots of things where it's real easy to get too caught up in drawing everything by hand, which I'm going to keep saying I actually prefer that look. I prefer when it is all hand done. But there's just those times when you're doing something and you really want to feel better about it. So alleviate that bit of stress on yourself and just kind of use some of these tools to aid you in that process. You see right there, it actually looks too thick because I started with a line down here. But again, I can also use this to build up the line. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually starting a little bit wider on each point, but then I'm converging down to the center of this point. So it gives me this tapered line. So again, using that shift click in a different way to kind of aid me in that process of a more hand-drawn feel, a tapered line, which in turn helps with perspective. So like I mentioned in the very beginning when we did the centerpiece to the ceiling, by tapering these lines along with perspective, you can really convey more depth. So I really need to be using a bigger brush instead of redrawing this line too many times. Because if you don't have good hand control, you'll generally make the line a little bit more wobbly by passing over it too many times. But it really depends on where you're at as an artist. Some people have amazing hand control and redrawing the line only improves it. And it just, again, depends on what type of artist you are, where you're at. Now, remember, every time we're above the horizon line, so let me put the perspective back in place. We're only slightly above the horizon line. The horizon line is this middle blue one that's kind of on an angle. Generally, it's going to be straight, but remember, we tilted the panel. So since we are above that, we're looking up into the screen. Okay, so when you're above the horizon line, you're going to look up into a recessed area. But again, it's going to be more slight. So if you want it to be more convincing, the distance here is going to be more narrow than the distance on the side of this panel. If not, if it reads the same all the way around, it's just not going to be accurate for, it would basically say that the top is a thicker material. Because if it reads the same as the side, then the top would have to have a bigger inset to make that make sense. So it's a lot of judgment calls. And then really this side right here, you're not going to see that side. So this line is going to disappear behind here. You're going to get a little bit of the angle from the connection point there. So it's going to look more like that. So little details like this are what kind of make the panel read a little bit more coherently. I don't know that it's a must that everything is perfection in that regard, but it's good to pay attention to it and try to think about, okay, what edge would I see and why, and really analyze it. So you see, I could be going a lot quicker with like the shift click method. So if time is the issue for you on a panel like this, then by all means, use whatever method saves you that amount of time and gets the job done. All right, and I actually don't want this flipped, so I'm going to go back to our navigator, flip that one more time. I like seeing it exactly the way it is, and then I might zoom up a little bit tighter like that. Yeah, and I can see some of the imperfections, the kind of weird shape of the screen itself. That this centerpiece, what I consider to be a centerpiece, isn't exactly centered. I can definitely see it there. Now remember, I'm not going to correct this one. I'm not too worried about it. But if you are and you wanted something like that corrected, remember that your crisscrossing gives you your center in perspective. So look how far off that is. Wow, pretty bad. But again, I'm not going to worry too much about it. Maybe I'll go back and show you a way to edit it, because really, after this is all inked, you can make changes pretty significantly by selecting and shifting it and reconnecting the lines. So maybe we'll use that as an example. But again, I'm not that awfully concerned with it. But I did notice it more in the smaller thumbnail than I noticed at full size. So just try that out. That may or may not work for you. But I typically think that viewing the work smaller exposes certain flaws. Just like flipping it exposes another series of flaws. Generally, flipping it for me exposes symmetry errors. Okay, so again, I'm going to just kind of jump through here with the shift click and then resculpt the line a little bit. And see, now this is further up from the horizon, so we're going to see more of the inset to that material. Using Command Z to go back. Just kind of do something like this. Maybe a thinner line up top. Throw in that little curve there, and then finish it down this way. Now this one, I got it looking like it's a lot more, has a lot more depth than the other screens. I wanted there to be that variation where some things look more, have more depth and more inset. And that also gives me the opportunity to do more little detailing. You see that I basically just did a very simplified approach, and that's like a shadow here and some lines. So again, this is one of those things of like, how much time do I have? Do I have time to go back and keep adding in these little bits of detail? But some of the details I'll try to do in between these, like I kind of mentioned, is just some of this like little circuitry looking stuff. It doesn't take an absorbent amount of time to do this. And you can really be ultra creative with this. Like you can put like these little ringed wires going up through here, and definitely the areas where it gets larger, I'll illustrate that in more detail and show you. But it's kind of neat because you can see over there, it just adds a little bit more fill to those white areas, those plain Jane areas. So it's just a sort of texture. Now remember too, you can also use this shift click method with translucent. So as I get some of this in place and say I miss an area, say I go, I've got this line close, but I make it too wide like this. I can go back with this in a translucent brush, hold shift click and drag, and I can clean that up pretty quickly. So just be aware there's lots of ways to utilize that method if you're working with this particular program. And most of them support translucent versions of every brush at this point. So again, I'm going to pass through here, but I got to be careful that I don't eliminate that silhouette shape that we created in the beginning. I think so far it's pretty good, but I do want to keep an eye on it. And I'm using this a little bit more because it's just so fast and easy. So again, I want to think about the depth that I'm going to see here. We are above the horizon line, so I think we'll see some of this side edge here, but it would probably make sense that it's going to be more narrow. So I'm going to bring this line down, and I'm going to try to make this one a bit more narrow in view, and then widen it back out. So what that means to me is just based on the perspective, our eye level is a little bit lower, so we're just seeing the side a little bit more. And it's actually right on the edge where we might see a little bit of this bottom edge, because see how close we're getting to the horizon line? We're on it. So at that point, you probably still wouldn't see it, but just be aware that as you start to pass below that, you're going to start to see the bottom ridge of these other screens. So if I was to move this over and draw through this perspectively, you see that perspective's off, so I'm going to use shift click. We're going to start to see the bottom inset of the screen, just like that. And really, this line itself needs to be shifted because it is perspective, it shouldn't be the same width. It has to be a noticeable width increase as it gets closer to the viewer. More like that. So just little things to pay attention to. Let's go ahead and wrap it up here, head over to the next lesson and continue to detail this work. So with that, let's move on.